Well, good morning. My name is Mark Thiessen. I'm a scholar at the American Enterprise Institute and columnist for the Washington Post. And I'm joined this morning by Governor Kim Reynolds, who is my favorite governor in the whole country. And I'm sure after this conversation, she'll be your favorite governor as well. She's the 43rd governor of the state of Iowa, the first woman elected to the state's highest office. She was previously Clark County Treasurer, served in the Iowa Senate, Lieutenant Governor under Terry Branstad, and now Governor herself. She is a blizzard of conservative reform, from education to taxes to the size of government. She is just one of these hopeful, optimistic Reaganite leaders who I hope will be showing us the direction for the Republican Party, not just on education, but across the board. So, Governor, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Oh, Mark, it's great to be with you, and thank you for that very kind introduction. I love what I do, and I'm very blessed.
Well, before we get to education, I know the reason we're doing this by video is because you've had a terrible tornado, I believe, in Iowa, and hurricanes, and some people have passed away. Just tell us a little bit about how things are going in Iowa, how the recovery effort's going, and what's going on.
Yeah, well, this is the second series of tornadoes we've had through our state in a month. The one that happened just recently on Tuesday night impacted over 32 counties of our 99. We've had actually 5 fatalities. But I'm telling you, as devastating and horrific as it is, it's inspiring when you're on site to just see the resiliency of Iowans, the strong response from our first responders, and most importantly, communities. We had to kind of step people back. We had so many volunteers on site wanting to help, and we needed to secure the perimeters. But thanks for all the prayers. We're just putting resources together, and we're going to get back on our feet and come back stronger than ever.
Well, one of the things that's helping you through this crisis, obviously, is the resilience of the people and the wisdom of the people of Iowa. And you're one of the themes of your governorship is trusting Iowans with their own lives. And so you've passed the most sweeping school choice law in the country. You're going to give every student in the state of Iowa an education savings account of just over $7,600 a year, which they can use to go to the school of their choice, private, public, or parochial. You've managed to do it without reducing funding for public schools, actually increasing funding for public schools. I mean, talk to us a little bit about this law and how. And it's you signed it in January of 2023. It's we're a little over a year later. How's it going?
Yeah, it's going really, really well. First of all, incredible team. It started with COVID, to be quite honest, and that. I mean, parents got a front row seat to what was happening in our educational system. We were fortunate. We got our kids back in the classroom early on. One of the first states to give parents the option of either in class or from home. Parents would make that decision. But I started for 2 years. We tried to get an ESA, an education savings account, across through the legislature and to my desk. For the first year, we did a small group. 34 failing schools was the cohort that we were targeting. We were able to get that through the Senate. It was stopped in the House. Wasn't going to give up, so I came back the second year, and we made it a little bit bigger. So we said if you were at 400% of federal poverty level, or a student with an IEP, an educational, that you need a student with disabilities or an IEP, then with a 10,000 cap, then you would qualify for an ESA for school choice. Passed the Senate, didn't get through the House once again. So at that part, Mark, I stepped back and I just said, well, I'm going to continue to be an enabler, or I'm going to do something about it. And decided at that point because I was hearing from parents, and that's what they wanted. I was hearing it over and over. Let me make the choice on what's the best facility for my child to be educated in. And so I engaged in Republican primaries. I engaged in 9, and it was a simple question: do you support parental choice? And if they did, we endorsed and we engaged in the primaries. And so we won 8 of 9. So we were very successful. And so then with that, and I ended up winning by about 19%. And so I thought that was solid commitment to parental choice. And so we came back big. We decided to do universal school choice, phased in over 3 years, no caps. So the first year it was 300% of FPL, all new kindergartners and anybody else that was in the system, private or public. If they met that qualification, they could apply. This year it's 400%, new kindergartens, 400% of federal poverty level. And next year it's universal with no caps. Anybody can apply to send their children where they believe they can get the best education.
Well, you alluded to this, that the reason you weren't able to pass it initially was because of Republican opposition.
Yes.
And you challenged Republicans in primaries. You got involved in primaries in order to push it, and you went to the polls, and you got, not only did you win those primaries, you got a mandate from the voters. You won with almost 20% of the vote in your election to a full term. And I think Governor Greg Abbott in Texas has now done the same thing, sort of mimicking you, where he was having trouble because Republicans were blocking school choice. What you're doing, what Governor Abbott is doing, is this a model for other governors across the country? And how is the battle for, why are there, first of all, I mean, most of us think of that most Republicans support school choice. Who are these Republicans who are opposing school choice, and how do we overcome this?
Well, I sent Greg a note right after the primary election, and I said, congratulations, it looked like parental choice had a great night. And he said, hey, Gov, thanks for the game plan. So, it's not something, I know, it's not something I took lightly. You don't really want to do that, but that was what the people were asking for. And it was reflected not only in the primary, as you indicated, but in the general election. I would say, we passed collective bargaining reform back in 2017. So in Iowa, unions weren't as big as of an issue. What our issue was, and I think actually it was the issue in Texas as well, was some of our rural lawmakers, and it's just a different dynamic in what they're dealing with, their perception of school choice. They don't have a lot of the same opportunities. And so what I had to do is start to reach out to superintendents in rural schools. I sat down and held several meetings knowing that I wouldn't change their mind, but I wanted to ask them, what can we do to help you be more innovative, to help you be more competitive? And over, I heard from them, I can't be competitive with teacher salaries, and I cannot be competitive with the regulatory restrictions that you guys place on us. And so I put that as part of the bill. So I gave rural lawmakers something that they could point to say that they were helping their schools and their constituents as well. And so we gave flexibility and some categorical funding that allowed them to use that for teacher salaries, so they could increase teacher salaries. And then we reached out, really identified some of the top concerns with regulatory and just ridiculous reporting that we were requiring them to do, and to make that a part of the bill. And then I worked extensively with leadership. And the other key thing that I did is I brought members, legislators into my office. We sat down, we went through the bill, gave them kind of the talking points, why we were doing what we were doing. And I think that, when you combine all of that, it was really successful. And then we also said, hey, we need to keep this tight. We can't get this, with the lobby inserts and all of the people that are against it, and then they play one chamber against the next. And if we could agree to keep it, pretty tight as drafted, then we would be more successful. And actually we did. We passed it in 3 weeks, which is crazy, and signed. That's crazy.
Well, and you also did it in a way that actually increased funding for public schools.
Yeah.
So as I understand it, and correct my numbers if I'm wrong, because this is also what Doug Ducey did in Arizona, who was the first person who passed this kind of law. You're providing a voucher of about $7,600 to the students, but the amount of money you're spending in combined federal, state, and local is $17,000.
Yes.
So the $7,600 follows the student, but the rest of the money stays with the school district anyway. So they're actually making money for students who are not there anymore. And on top of that, you added another $1,500 roughly per student if a student leaves a school for a public school for parochial school. So they're actually making, the public schools are doing better financially because of the school choice. Is that right?
Yeah, yes. Actually, that's a really good point. And we put new money in. So we estimated the cost of what it would be to provide the ESAs and put new money into the system, so we weren't impacting public. And to your point, just the state funds follows the students, but the federal and local actually stays with the school districts, which is significant. And it's about $1,400 that they get to retain. That they're not teaching the students. So they really couldn't say that it was an impact to public schools, because we did not take any of the funding from them.
One of you were able to pass this in the context of the pandemic school closures. Yeah. One of the things that one of your most important education reforms, you were one of the first governors in the country who mandated 5 days a week in-person education if parents wanted it. But you were actually sued, I think, by the Des Moines School District to keep the schools closed. So you had to fight to keep these schools. The teachers' unions were fighting to keep the schools closed while you were trying to let kids into the schools. Did that fuel the public desire for school choice? Because what was happening was, in the rest of the country, I assume in Iowa as well, is that affluent parents whose schools were not providing all the Catholic schools in the country stayed open, right? All the parochial schools, a lot of the private schools did, but it was the public schools that were closing. And so parents who could afford it were just pulling their kids out of public school and saying, okay, I'll send them in, I'll take the hit financially and send them into parochial and private schools. But poor parents couldn't do that. A lot of majority school districts, the parents couldn't do that. This was a racial equity issue in a way. So talk to us about how the pandemic helped you push this school choice over the top.
Oh, absolutely. And I heard from parents. We did roundtables, Zoom, of course, but met with parents, listened to parents. They were so frustrated. I said to the media, you always accuse me of not caring for the vulnerable, the kids that are being left behind, the kids that are not having access to schools, to a safe environment, to a hot meal, to continue their education, were the kids that needed it most. And it was unconscionable. To your point, we had parents, we had Des Moines Public School Board members that had put their child in a private school while they kept their school closed and took a vote to close it. I mean, it was just the nuts. It was crazy, the things that were happening. It was okay for her, but anybody else, we had a lot of schools, a lot of the larger schools that couldn't even count for a lot of the students. So just completely lost. And so honestly, COVID handed us this opportunity on a silver platter, and we were going to take advantage of it. We were already, we have a very robust homeschool program. We had open enrollment. We had charter. We were, trying. We did it at the same time, trying to just increase parental choice. But this was an opportunity, and it was something that parents was asking for, that we could deliver to them. And most importantly, I think, Mark, the benefit is it just makes all of our school systems stronger. The fact of the matter is 90% of our students are going to go to a public school. And when they have to compete for students, they're going to be better, and we're going to be better, and our kids are going to get a better education because of it. And then I'll just tell you, once it passed and I signed it into law, it wasn't 2 weeks that one of our Des Moines Public was up on air saying, I know parents, you have a choice of where your child will be educated. And I want to tell you, we are going to do everything we can to be that school of choice. So already we're changing the mindset and the culture, and that's a good thing for our kids. Iowa used to be top of the heap when it came to education, and we've fallen. And I can tell you, with the changes that we're making in parental choice, in expanding charter schools, enrollment, early literacy, we passed some really great legislation this year. We're going to be back on top when it comes to K-12 education, and our kids are going to be better for it.
The other thing that you mentioned in passing was that you have so many reforms that you almost can't do justice to all of them. But one of the first things you did in office was collective bargaining reform, which enabled all of this. If you didn't have collective bargaining reform, you'd never be able to get this through. The program. Talk about the importance of collective bargaining and what role the teachers unions are playing in stymieing school choice, not just in Iowa but across the country.
Well, it started in COVID. We didn't see anything like we did from Randy Weingarten or from Chicago or some of the larger schools, but literally, they were sending me obituaries to my home. They had teachers doing that during COVID. And as you know, none of that has proved out. We also eliminated the mask mandate. We said parents will decide if their kids are going to be in school. But we passed collective bargaining reform, where the only thing that they can bargain for is an increase, and it's leveled at whatever the growth is. There's a level that it's set at. But that really, they can't withdraw from their checks if they want to contribute to the union. They have to proactively send them the funding. They have to recertify every 2 years. So really bold. Scott Walker kind of led the way in Wisconsin. We mimicked what they had done. So he was a real inspiration. You mentioned Doug Ducey. I want to give him a huge shout out. He really was such a mentor and a great colleague. I had the opportunity to serve with him, and just really gave us the pathway to what we could do for ESAs and universal school choice. So I just really appreciate him as well. But all of that is really, I think, been a part of the strength that we're seeing with our program. Can real quick,
Yeah.
we stood it up in 8 weeks. I got to give a shout out to my team. Odyssey is the vendor. They did a great job. But when you think about, we passed it the first 3 weeks in January of a session. That's crazy. Any governor out there, I don't know. They don't do anything at the first couple months. But we stood it up in just under 8 weeks. And so we were taking applications May 30th, closed the end of June, and we were allocating the funding by July 15th. We had projected about 14,000. We're a small state. ESA's the first year we had 18,900 actually approved. And this year already, and we're open until June 30th, I think we're at about 27,500. So that
Wow.
have already been approved. So, or that have applied, and about 22,300 have been approved. So 27,500 has applied, 23 approved. We've got about an 81% approval rate. It takes about 5 minutes to fill out the application, and within 30 seconds, you know if you've been approved or not. So I think we're the first fully automated system, and the team stood that up in about 8 weeks. And so we're really proud of what we've been able to do. And again, it's going to make the whole system stronger. And most importantly, we're going to improve our outcomes for our kids. And that's really the goal of all of this.
Absolutely. The other thing about collective bargaining reform is that it improves, you have more money for teacher pay, and I know you've raised teacher pay in the state of Iowa, and also it gets rid of these ridiculous rules like, last hired, first fired, like where you can't, under collective bargaining,
Right.
You couldn't promote on merit, you had to promote on seniority. So I would think that good teachers are really happy with the reforms you allow, because if you're a good teacher, you're going to get a pay raise, you're going to get better opportunities, you're going to get promoted. Talk a little bit about how collective bargaining reform has allowed you to strengthen good teacher and strengthen teaching in the state.
Well, we really want to do everything we can to give them the tools to be successful. We just did 9.2 million. I'm going to go back to literacy because that's so important, and so many of our kids can't read today. And if we're setting them up to fail if they can't read by third grade, because that's when they transition from learning to read to reading to learn. And so we put $9.2 million into letters training for our educators and administrators. It's a science of reading program. It's getting back to phonics. It is a game changer. We have unbelievable data that's showing the results of that. We have money to train 5,500 teachers, 1,500 administrators. So we're going through that process, already seeing great results because of that. And again, we're just giving our teachers the tools to be successful and really recognizing the value that they bring to the classroom, and recognizing the impact that they're having on students' growth. We're measuring growth. I'm proud to say that we increased teacher salary, the largest increase in the history of our state. Beginning teacher salary over 2 years ago to $50,000. And I thought it was really important that the teachers that were in the classroom also be recognized, because, it's a lot different than it was 12 years ago. A lot of challenges, a lot of, requirements that are coming in from the federal administration. And so any educator that has been in the classroom for 12 years or more, their base will be 62,000. It's 60 this year and then goes to 62 next year. And then, to your point, we set up an additional merit program to really continue to recognize educators that are going above and beyond in driving excellence in the classroom, and demonstrating growth. We wanted it to be fair, but actual growth in a student's progress over the school year. So really excited about that as well. And then we expanded school choice, or excuse me, public charter school options. We had the existing school boards deciding whether they could have one or not. Well, that didn't get very far because we only had 2 in the state because they just weren't in favor of them. And it's a public charter school that drives innovation. It's free. And so we did some changes to that, where we stood up founding groups, and it was actually the State Department of Education, the state board, that made the decision. And a year after we made that decision, we've had 8 apply and been approved. So we are seeing tons of interest for charter school startups in the state, everything from science to dropout students to help them re-engage and set them up to be successful, to just whatever innovative programs are out there. We want them to come to Iowa and be a part of our educational reform package.
And also, before you even passed the private and parochial school choice, you enacted public school choice because you enacted open enrollment, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Students in Iowa can go to not just any private or parochial school; they can go to any public school they want. Isn't that right?
Yeah, yeah, and we were having, there was an odd thing that was in place where it really prevented some of our larger schools, some of the kids from leaving. So we got rid of some antiquated language there, made it completely open enrollment, and so again, parental choice. When we had a school district that was saying if a junior high student, wanted to change his name, his pronouns, make some really life-changing decisions, the schools had put a policy in place that they didn't have to notify the parents. So that was part of the parental choice too, just all the crazy stuff that was happening, the critical race theory, just things that were being injected on our children. Well, you can imagine the outrage from parents when they found out about that. And so we banned that. We passed a parental rights bill. But you've seen that same school district still is probably has some policies that are impacting education, and they've lost a lot of students this year, and a lot of that has not just been to private, but a great deal of those students have moved to other public schools that are really focused on education and not other issues. And so that's another good thing that we're driving.
You've got so many reforms that you almost can't do them all justice. But you mentioned CRT. You banned CRT in Iowa public schools. But isn't school choice really the best solution to that? Because we see in a lot of these school boards where the parents are going to fight in the school boards against CRT and all this. They have to fight because they're stuck, right?
Yeah.
Isn't the solution to all of this just to let parents choose their schools? And then if the schools are teaching radical ideologies, rather race ideologies, gender ideologies, other things like that, they can just pull their kids. They don't have to go to a school board and fight, right?
Spot on. And that's what I say all the time when I'm out there. We've done all the things that we needed to do and took it head on and passed it, in a very timely manner. But ultimately they can find ways around it. And, even in a classroom, you can't be in every single classroom. And if you're not talking to your kids, you sometimes just aren't aware of what's happening. But ultimately, when you give parents the choice and have the dollars follow the child, then that is the best thing that we could do. And so, the schools that had lost several students, whether it was to private schools through the ESAs or through open enrollment, the first thing they said is we're not getting enough money. It's because, the governor didn't allocate enough funds. We put new money into education every single year. It's 56% of our budget, new money every single year, almost $1 billion over 8 years. I mean, of new money into education, new money into school choice. And it's not that, it's based on a per pupil allocation. So the reason that they were struggling and having to lay off teachers and seeing a decline was because of policies that they were making at their school district. And the other aspect of it, to be quite honest, and we talked a lot about this with all the ARPA funds that are coming in. I'm hitting on so many different things, but it's hard. So many different things.
It's really hard when you have so many reforms to just focus in on one. And they're all intertwined.
Apply to all of this is, they were using one-time ESSER money for salaries and for new positions, and you can't do that. You have to be very careful when you have these one-time monies coming into your state, how they're allocated. We really focused on infrastructure. We focused on apprenticeship program, just things that we knew we could test or pilot or would have long-term good impacts, but something that the state didn't have to take over the funding after the federal dollars were gone. And that happens so many times. And it just really can get a state and can get a school district in trouble very fast.
So I'm a parent, and so I look at all these issues through the eyes of a parent. And I have a child on the autism spectrum. And you've just done some new legislation to reform special ed in the state of Iowa. Talk to us a little bit about what you're doing for parents of children with learning differences and disabilities.
Yeah, well, it's really important to me, and we're not where we should be. And we put more money when you look at the average funding that goes into. It's called the AEA system in Iowa, but it's children with disabilities, and they do other things as well. But it's probably, honestly, Mark, the hardest thing I've done. It was an entrenched program. It hadn't been looked at for 50 years. It was a huge bureaucracy. It continued to just get out. The scope of what they were intended to do continued to grow. $529 million of funding going into this program. And as I started lifting up the layers and taking a look at it, Not one person could tell me how the services, how the money was being applied, what the cost of the services was. And even though we were above average for the amount of money that we were spending per student, our scores were below average and have been for 10 to 8 years. And it was just unconscionable, unacceptable, and tons of money in administrating. We were seeing chiefs making 374,000. Now that is a lot in Iowa. There's 9 of them, so much duplication. We didn't take one dime out of the system, but we have brought transparency, accountability, and really, I think, metrics to the system. We really have moved oversight and supervision back to the Department of Education. They had 7 times the employees in this AEA system than the Department of Education. And so really have restructured it. We have 9 regions, but ultimately kept the money in the system, but we're bringing it out of the admin and really getting it down into the system, into the classroom, and most importantly, to the services for these kids and these students, so we can make sure that they have better outcomes. Wow, I can't even begin to tell you how hard this was. I was in the Senate in 2011. We tried to do something then, same type of concerns, but just got shut down. So I dropped a bomb on at the condition of the state, and whoa, I mean, we got everybody's attention, but it had to happen, I think, in order to just get more than a steady, to really actually do something where people know what the services are, how they're being provided, metrics applied, transparency, accountability, consistency across the state, so all of our kids have the same opportunity to succeed and be successful. I'm proud of it. It was hard, but I believe you're going to see some really good things come of it. So I'm really excited about it too.
That's awesome. I'm also the parent of a female student athlete. You passed legislation protecting women and girls sports. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think we did that in 2018. My granddaughter just ran at the state track meet. So grandma was there cheering her on.
That's awesome.
It's a boys and girls state track meet. And all you have to do is look at the scores of the events, and it's pretty obvious that these girls, it's a fairness issue, and they deserve every single opportunity to compete, to have an opportunity for scholarships, and to do great things. And when I looked at like a 4x200, that's what Avery ran in. All 24 scores of the boys 4x200 race were lower than the times, were lower than the winner of the girls 4x200. And it's just so ridiculous and insane what we're seeing happen. And we're gonna, our Attorney General has joined the Arkansas lawsuit. So we're gonna challenge this president. Why he wants to race women, I have no idea. The people aren't with him on this. We all have granddaughters and kids that are competing, and it's just crazy. It is crazy, and we're going to fight him every step of the way.
You've taken on CRT in schools. What is the situation on campuses in universities in Iowa right now? Are you having these encampments?
Yep.
How have you handled this? And what's going on with the DEI bureaucracy in Iowa universities? Because I know in Florida they've gotten rid of the DEI bureaucracy. Other conservative governors have done that. Are you taking that issue on? What are you doing with DEI?
We just did that this year and passed it. We've eliminated it in all of our universities.
I'm going to come up with something you haven't done before the end of this conversation, but it's going to be really hard.
We still got a lot to do. We just did that this year, and we've set the expectations. No requirements for no opportunity for DEI, eliminated in all of our state universities. Listen, I want to say I'm proud of our regents and our state universities. I sent a letter out early on, and there was a direct correlation from the lack of response and the escalation of what we saw happening on our elite campuses across this country. And I just wanted to let them know that we weren't going to let it happen. We stood ready to support them. We absolutely protect the First Amendment and free speech, but, hate speech and intimidating our Jewish students and vandalizing our property is not going to be accepted. And so we had a couple peaceful protests. They were fine, short-termed, and then we did have some tents that started to go up at one of the universities, and honestly, within 45 minutes, they were up and down and out. So, and that's been the end of it. So, I thought, well, Ben Sass said it right. Absolutely, we're not daycare providers, but I mean, what you do is you set clear expectations, what the consequences are going to be, and then you follow through. And about the time you think you're going to negotiate with the individuals that are terrorizing our Jewish community and driving anti-Semitism is crazy. You've lost at that point, and it's just really unconscionable. But I think Mitch Daniels also made a really good point when he said, this is a clarifying moment for our parents. These elite universities are not that anymore. When you think about the type of education versus indoctrination that we're seeing happening on this campus, when you have professors that are a part of the vitriol verbiage that we're seeing, speech that we're seeing demonstrated on these campuses, and honestly, just the safety of our kids. Is it worth the value? Is it worth the money that we're putting into that? I hope people really think about that. I hope people that are supporting them think about that. There needs to be some consequences to what's happening, and there's a lot of options, a lot of opportunity, a lot of options out there where your kids are safe and your child will get a quality education. But it's really unconscionable.
What do we do to address this issue in the campuses? Because this explosion of anti-Semitism and these protests, it's just it's the consequence of allowing the CRT ideology to spread in these colleges, where kids are being indoctrinated into, because it's not just anti-Israel, it's not just anti-Jewish, it's anti-American. They hate our system of government, and they're taught that the world is divided into oppressors and oppressed, and the oppressed can do no wrong, including October 7th, and the oppressors can do no right, and they don't have a right to defend themselves. And they've been taught this for decades, and all of a sudden now this is blowing up. This should be a wake-up call. What do we do to root this out of our educational system?
Well, I mean, I think if some of the Congress is taking a look at it, it's are we going to continue to fund this? Are we going to continue to make it possible? We got to step in. People that are supporting it and writing checks, that you're seeing some of their big donors say, "Oh my God, this is I'm where I am because of what America offered me." But you're right. It's not just anti-Semitism. They hate our being. They hate everything that we are. And I think for too long we didn't pay any attention to it. We actually let it happen and let it grow on our universities. And so that's one of the reasons I've been very aggressive on legislation at the state level for our K-12 education system, because I said, by God, I'm not going to stand by and let them happen to our K-12 educational system, because that's where they're at right now. I mean, we're putting civics back in the classroom. We're making sure that we talk about important historical. We've added Holocaust as a requirement. I mean, we have to get back to really the basics, but and how we I don't know, respond to this. But a lot of it is, I mean, people need to really think about the dollars that are going into it, the private sector that is funding it, the expectations of our universities, tenure. I think down in Florida, they've done something with tenure that I talked to an individual yesterday that's on chair of a couple of different colleges in Florida, and he said that's the biggest impact that he's had that they've been able to make in our university collegiate system was to take a look at addressing tenure. So I mean, we're going to maybe take a look at that again this year and see where that goes. I don't know. So, Mark, there's so much. I mean, the other thing is, here's the other thing on these college campuses, a lot of the people weren't even students. So, I mean, it's intentional. So you've got outside sources that are taking advantage of a weak administrator and a weak board and just an ideology that, that's gone rampant, and they're inserting into it too. So it's a lot of things that have to be addressed to get a handle on this.
Okay, so you've passed universal school choice, open enrollment, collective bargaining reform, protecting women and girls sports, cracking down on CRT, increasing teacher pay, breaking the teachers' unions. These are all great reforms, but you're also a Reaganite small government conservative. You've done this while cutting taxes,
Yeah.
and reducing the size of government. You've eliminated, I think, reduced the cabinet departments from 37 to 16 in the government. Talk to us a little bit about what you've done to leave taxpayers with more of their money and to reduce the size of government, and how have you managed to do that while doing all these great reforms that are giving parents more choice and improving public education and private education in the state?
Yeah. Well, I'm really, really proud of what we were able to do. First of all, we weren't competitive and we were over collecting. And so I actually this year signed my fifth tax reform bill into law since 2018. Our individual income tax rate, we'll start with that. We went from the sixth highest to the sixth lowest. When I took office, we had 9 brackets. The top rate was 8.98%. The bill I signed this year will take us January 1 to a flat tax of 3.8%. So eliminated 9 brackets, eliminated federal deductibility. We did it in a sustainable manner over about 5 years, but ultimately we'll go from 8.98 to 3.8, and we're not done. We're going to be able to continue to take that down. We're still, our economy is growing, revenue is growing, and when we factor in the tax cuts, when you account for them, we're a revenue positive. Corporate tax, we were 12%, highest in the country. We were able to implement a trigger, and so we'll hit 5.5 flat by 2026. That's 2 years ahead of schedule. We're at about I think we're scheduled to go to 6.4 next year, so that's 12% down to 6.4. And we eliminated tax on inheritance and retirement income. We're actually, because we got such a low cost of living here in the state of Iowa, we're the #1 state to retire in. So I love to give Governor DeSantis a bad time about that, because I don't have an ocean, or I don't have year-round warm weather. So, we got to be very creative in Iowa to be able to do that. So really proud of what we've been able to do with that. But the key to that is not just reducing taxes and being more competitive. And so we're seeing people really start to pay attention to Iowa. We've had a lot of companies moving in. We've actually saw a net migration in for the first time, last 2 years, for the first time in decades. And Minnesota and Illinois certainly cannot say that. So my neighbors to the north and to the east are bleeding people right and left. But you have to keep your spending in check as well. And so even with cutting taxes, we've made historic investments in priorities important to Iowa: childcare, housing, mental health, education. So we've really still been able to drive those priorities as well. But then I'm really taking a look at state government, and it's ridiculous. I mean, it's just the growth. We never eliminate a program. We just add. So I cut 21 agencies from my cabinet, projected to save about $300 million over 4 years. I think that's probably going to be conservative. We just did a complete review of boards and commissions. I think we eliminated 83 there. That had never been done before. And then by really starting with state government, we've done a red tape review, really reduced the amount of regulatory reform. We put a moratorium on new. We put in a mandatory 5-year review of every single rule, if it's doing the job, the impact to business, and just to validate it. And then this year we passed behavioral health reform. So now we're starting to take the reform at the state level and move it into the state and into the systems. So we have 32 regions when you think of mental health and substance use, separate, fragmented, 14 different doors for people to go through. We've brought them together and created 7 mental health regions, again, to get the money out of admin, out of the bureaucracy, into the state, and really into services for Iowans. So it's a combination of growth, being more competitive, keeping spending in check, while really reducing and being more efficient with government. Let me just highlight a couple things real quick. Like, for instance, and we know we need healthcare workers. Prior to the realignment in state government, it took 65 days to get a physician license, and we are now able to do it in 2. I had a 5,400 case backlog in unemployment, projected timeline to get that caught up over a year. By realigning, we were able to get it completely caught up in 3 months. And I can give you example of example of example. We combined the MVE, Motor Vehicle Enforcement, and the Department of Public Safety. We brought them together. That allowed us to put 100 more troopers on the road, which is really important with the open border that we have right now and the chaos and crisis that we see happening in this country because of a president that's not doing his constitutional duty to protect the sovereignty of this country and, most importantly, the citizens. And so, it's really important that we're able to keep our communities and Iowans safe at a time of just crisis in this country due to a lack of leadership from this administration.
Yeah. So I started out by saying that you are a blizzard of hopeful, optimistic, conservative reform. I think we've proven that over the course of this discussion. What's left? I mean, can you, other than maybe taking this national one day?
Yeah. Oh no. Well, we're gonna keep looking at our tax environment. I indicated that, and we can. So we just want to make sure it's sustainable. And then honestly, we want to continue to look at just how government operates in the state. Boy, it's a wealth of opportunity. We are very inefficient. And so many times, I think it had been 150 years since they'd looked at regulatory reform, 50 for state boards. I don't know, it's ridiculous. So we'll continue to look at that. And then it's just really implementing the things that we have enacted and making sure that we're doing a good job at that. So we've given parents choice, but I want to make sure that every one of those opportunities are executing in the manner that we expect them to. So you have to make sure that what you're doing is working and being implemented with integrity, and you're actually getting the outcome. So you have to hold yourself accountable. So we'll continue to do that too. And if we've made, if we need to make some adjustments, you have to be willing to do that. You have to be willing to say, oh, we maybe got this a little bit wrong, but here's what we can do to fix that going forward. But I love what I'm doing. This is the kind of things that really, fire me up and, make me want to come to work every day. And I love what we're doing here in our state.
Well, we're glad you're there. We're glad you're doing what you're doing. I said at the start of this, you're my favorite governor. I think everyone can see why. Governor Reynolds, thank you so much for joining us today. And our hearts and prayers are with the people of Iowa this morning.
Thank you. We'll take that. Thank you.
Take care.